Beatrice Robinson just wanted to board a flight to visit her granddaughter. But instead, she was met with humiliation and blatant discrimination. What the airline staff didn't realize was that Beatrice was the mother of one of the most powerful figures in the industry, someone who would ensure this injustice did not go unpunished. Surrounded by cruelty, Beatrice made up her mind. This would be the last time she faced such degradation, and what she did next would shock everyone. But let's start at the beginning. Beatrice Robinson, a 68-year-old African-American woman, stood in line at the airport, eager to check in for her flight. She was traveling to another city to see her granddaughter, who had recently begun her first semester at university. Excitement filled her heart, though it was tinged with the familiar unease that accompanied her in spaces where she feared bias and mistreatment. Still, today, she focused on the joy of the upcoming reunion. When it was her turn, she confidently handed her ticket and passport to the airline employee, a young woman who barely glanced at her before delivering a chilling response. "Your ticket has expired," she said flatly after a brief look at her computer. "You won't be able to board this flight." Beatrice blinked in confusion. "That can't be right," she said calmly. "I bought the ticket in advance and made sure everything was in order." The employee sighed in exasperation. "The ticket is invalid," she repeated with a tone that made it clear the conversation was over. "Please step aside." Beatrice looked around. She saw other passengers, white passengers, checking in without issue. A familiar, bitter sense of injustice washed over her. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a blatant act of discrimination. Her heart tightened, but she remained resolute. "Please check again," she said, her voice steady. "I'm sure there's been a mistake." The employee rolled her eyes and glanced at the screen once more, clearly annoyed. "I already told you, ma'am," she said with a smirk. "Your ticket is invalid." Next, Beatrice watched as a white man at the next counter was handed his boarding pass with no trouble at all. Her frustration built as the realization sank in. This was about more than just a ticket. She couldn't let it go. With a deep breath, she made her way to the customer service desk. Inside her, two emotions battled: the urge to avoid confrontation and the firm conviction that she had to stand up for herself. Her late husband's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her, "Never let anyone treat you as less than you are." She couldn't let them win. When she reached the desk, she was met with a man who didn't even bother to look at her as she spoke. "I've been told my ticket is invalid, but I'm sure it's a mistake. Could you please help me?" she asked politely. The man, still staring at his screen, barely acknowledged her presence. "Ma'am, if they told you your ticket is invalid, then that's how it is," he said dismissively. "We have strict rules." Beatrice's patience was wearing thin. "I've checked my tickets several times." "I'm only asking you to take a look," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. The manager finally looked up, sneering. "I don't have time for this. If you don't like it, you can contact customer support online," he snapped. His eyes conveyed only disdain. Stunned by his rudeness, Beatrice took a step back. She was used to being dismissed, used to being treated as lesser. But today, something was different. This time, it felt like an outright refusal of her humanity, and it cut deep. "I just want to be treated fairly," she said softly, but firmly, meeting his gaze. The manager's sneer deepened. "If you don't leave the counter, I'll call security," he threatened. Security guards standing nearby began to approach. Beatrice's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. She knew if she backed down now, she'd be letting them win, letting them take away the dignity she had fought so hard to maintain throughout her life. This was about more than just a ticket now. It was about justice. Her eyes drifted to the phone in her coat pocket. An idea formed. If they wouldn't listen to her, maybe the world would. She pulled out her phone and began recording. "My name is Beatrice Robinson," she said, her voice calm but steady, "and I am at this airport, where I have been denied the right to fly with my legally purchased ticket. They claim it's invalid, but I know it isn't. I have been denied service because of the color of my skin." She panned the camera toward the manager and security guard, who were now closing in. The manager's expression twisted in irritation. "You're not allowed to film here," he said sharply. "I'll call the police." But Beatrice didn't stop. "If anyone sees this video," she continued, "please share it. This shouldn't happen to anyone. I just want fair treatment, but they don't want me here because I don't fit in." With a few quick taps, she posted the video to her social media, asking for help. Within minutes, her phone buzzed with notifications. People were reacting, sharing the video, and leaving messages of support. Her story was spreading. A young couple standing nearby came up to her. "We saw everything," the man said, his voice thick with anger. "This is wrong. We can testify that your ticket was valid." Beatrice smiled gratefully as the tension in her chest began to ease. The video was already going viral, with comments flooding in. The manager, now realizing the seriousness of the situation, began to panic. His sneer faded, replaced by nervous glances at the security guard. "Do you really want everyone to see how you're treating an elderly woman?" Beatrice asked, her voice sharp as she pointed the camera at the manager. "What do you think the public will say when they find out?" The pressure was mounting, and it showed. The security guard, who had confidently approached earlier, now hesitated, unsure of what to do. Then, the unexpected happened. One of the airline staff rushed over, whispering something into the manager's ear. He paled visibly and hurried to answer his phone. On the other end was Jonathan Robinson, Beatrice's son, one of the major shareholders in the airline. His tone was icy as he demanded an explanation for what had happened. The manager's face was drained of color. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Robinson," he stammered, now dripping with false politeness. "It seems there was a mistake. Let me get your boarding pass immediately." But Beatrice wasn't swayed by his sudden change of heart. She knew this wasn't an apology born from understanding or remorse. It was fear. And she wasn't done. "I want a public apology," she said firmly. "And I want guarantees that this company will review its policies. This should never happen to anyone again." The manager, knowing there was no point in resisting, nodded. Soon after, the airline issued a formal statement, promising an internal investigation. The employees involved were fired, and Beatrice's story became national news. At a press conference the next day, Beatrice stood before a crowd. "I've faced injustice all my life," she said, her voice steady and powerful. "But we can't stay silent anymore. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who has been humiliated and devalued. We all deserve respect, and I hope my case shows that justice can be won when we stand up and fight." Her words were met with thunderous applause, and Beatrice knew this was not just her victory. It was a victory for everyone fighting for justice.